So all that being said, what are we going to talk about today?
So today we're going to repeat what we talked about last time we tried this in the Microsoft 365 developer tenant is kind of what we're going to talk about. And it's interesting. I actually had a conversation with somebody about this just last night. We were talking about the developer tenant. So we're going to get hands-on with the Microsoft 365 developer tenant, how you can sign up for it, how you can get started with it, what you can use it for, maybe some things to be wary of if you want to try to use it. So we're going to dive in and actually stand one up and take a look inside of it and that process of getting one stood up and all of that.
All right, perfect.
So
I like to do this thing where I tell you, like, let's take a step back and just really briefly cover what a Microsoft 365 developer tenant is and why you would want one. Like, why are we going through this motion of creating a developer tenant? It's to click the buttons, yes, but also what can we do with it later?
Right. So do you want to start off sharing your screen and walking through what you have up? And then I'll do the clicky.
Sure.
All right.
Let's go.
So let's jump over to, I think I got the right one, to your screen. We have the both. Yeah, this is yours. We both have the same web page up on our shared screen right now. So I just had to make sure I was looking at Scott's screen.
So yeah, you just have to pay attention to all the extensions in the web browser.
Yes. And I have to look and make sure I'm clicking the right button on my Stream Deck and all that. So what is this developer tenant, Scott?
So a developer tenant is a sandbox environment. It's a Microsoft 365 tenant with licensing. It comes with E5 licenses, 25 of them, that you can use to test solutions that you are deploying on the Microsoft 365 platform. So maybe you're a developer out there, like, imagine that a developer tenant is for developers, and you're developing solutions for teams. Like maybe you're building apps for teams, you're building SharePoint framework components for SharePoint or to be hosted in Teams as a tab. Maybe you have this dream to become the next backup vendor for Exchange Online mailboxes, and you just want to build your solution and test it and vet it. This is a free way that you can get hands-on with the Microsoft 365 platform without impacting something like a production tenant. So if you're new to Microsoft 365, this is a way to kind of get hands-on and play with things. If you're in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem today, and you've been wondering, how can I get to an environment where I can test the deployment of new things, I can test a script without impacting my production environment? How can I do that in an environment that has access maybe to extended functionality based on licensing? Like I know, there's enough customers out there who are using things like, the A3, the E3 licenses. Maybe you want to get hands-on with the E5 license. You want to find something out that's going on there. You want to get hands-on with like Azure AD P2 functionality that's part of that E5. You can go ahead and do all that through the Microsoft 365 developer program. I'm an IT pro. I am not a dev. And I kind of view these as a handy way to go ahead and test things. Like I said, like deployment scripts along the way. You want to test that new PowerShell script that you wrote to go ahead and assign licensing based on user attributes, anything like that. It's all available to you and ready to go. The other cool thing about the Microsoft 365 developer program and the tenants that you get is it's not just access to the tooling, it's also access to things like sample data packs. So you have the opportunity when you deploy these tenants, and we'll kind of get into it as we're walking through deployment, to say, hey, I'm really interested in SharePoint. So go ahead and spin up a little bit of SharePoint content for me. Put some documents out there, create some sites automatically, things like that. So You don't have to spin everything up from scratch. The other nice thing that you can do along the way is these are full tenants. Like you get, like I said, 25 licenses along the way. You get access to all of the Office apps. It is a full tenant that you can go ahead and bind the domain to Azure AD through, so you can have a custom domain on it if you wanted to test email, routing, anything like that. But keep in mind it is a developer tenant. Like Microsoft could revoke it at any time. This isn't a production use thing, anything like that.
Right. So I have one
Along the way.
thing. This came up last night in my conversation, and I'm curious your thought because I had one thought, and it revolves around that custom domain. What I have heard, and I have not verified, is if you spin up these developer tenants and you assign a custom domain to it, and then Microsoft does what you said, they revoke it. 90 days in, they revoke it rather than like you going in and removing your domain. Like your domain ends up getting kind of stuck, bound to this developer tenant that you can't access anymore. So you can't actually go get that custom domain back. I figured that over time, like eventually it would expire and delete and you'd be able to get that tenant back. Somebody else told me, no, that's not the case. Like once it's bound to Office 365, even once that tenant kind of goes away, like 30, 60, 90 days later, that domain is like stuck. Takes like a miraculous feat to be able to get that custom domain back from a developer domain that has been revoked.
Yeah, I've never seen it mentioned in the FAQs or anything like that, but I don't know that there's any motivation for the Microsoft side to make that easy for you.
Right. So I would.
It is a non-production kind of thing. Like in my case, if I was going to go and bind a domain to one of these tenants, it would not be my primary domain. Like I would create a subdomain on there, like my test tenant. ScottHogue.com. I wouldn't bind it to ScottHogue.com or anything like that. And that way, when it goes away or it just falls off the cliff, you don't have to worry about it. I used to do that a lot with the CDX domains, like the CDX Transform program tenants that are available to Microsoft partners to go ahead and spin up and test solutions like this as well. Yeah, I don't even know how to be any more clear about it. Like, this is not the thing that you should spin up and stake your entire business on. If you're standing up, like, you're the company that is standing up your new product and you want to host your email on Office 365, you want to have a SharePoint site with all of your specs in it, you want to do chat and collaboration inside of Teams across your development org, like go buy a real Office 365 for subscription for that. Go ahead and assign licensing. But if you need to test a deployment or something like that, maybe having a dev tenant around would be a good place for you to have that.
Right. No, I agree. I just wanted I didn't want anybody to go lose their custom domain that they bought or go buy like one of those 99-cent XYZ domains that you pay for it for a year, you use it, and then you go buy another one when you need it. But like even subdomains, in theory, if you did like test or Scott test or Scott dev, next time you may have to do Scott dev 01, 02, etc.
Yeah. Yep. Totally.
But yeah, just one of those. Be careful with. To your point, this is a dev domain. Could go away at any time, and you can't like go back into it once it gets expired or revoked and go pull stuff out of it or change stuff. Like it's gone.
Yeah. So one more thing to kind of talk about before I turn it over to you, and I think we get into deployment, is just based on the name of these things, the Microsoft 365 developer program, you tend to focus and say, these are just for devs. I know a lot of folks who are not devs who have things like Visual Studio subscriptions. And when I started looking at this was kind of like that's new to me moment, is when you go over to all the documentation for this particular program. One of the top level articles is about joining the program with a Visual Studio Professional or Enterprise subscription. So lots of organizations hand out these types of subscriptions to developers, IT pros. Like every partner I've worked at, I've always had a Visual Studio subscription through them. They tend to get handed out as just part of partner benefits and things like that. So if you're signing up for one of these, like you come in and you say, hey, I'm just somebody, I want to play around with Microsoft 365, and you sign up, there is that kind of 90-day ticker that starts in there along the way. And you have to say to yourself, like, okay, what do I need to do to keep this tenant active? And that's a little bit of a fuzzy thing. Like, what does active mean in the parlance of Microsoft and how much they check in? Like, does that mean that I, as a non-dev, need to deploy an SPFX solution once a month? Like, how do I do that? Like, if that's not something I know how to do, I don't know how to build it, I'm not familiar with the tooling, things like that, potentially that would expire and go away from me. It changes a little bit if you are a Visual Studio Professional or Visual Studio Enterprise subscriber. And in that case, you can go ahead and sign up for one of these tenants. And as long as you're eligible within that, it's only available to select subscriptions. Who knows what that means? It was available to the ones that I checked that I have. They include access to these developer subscriptions from Microsoft 365, and you basically retain your subscription benefit for the developer program as long as your subscription for Visual Studio is valid, which I thought was kind of nifty. I think that takes potentially some of the pressure off the whole just what do I have to do to keep my renewable subscription renewed the whole time? You just go ahead and sign up through potentially the alternate flow from your Visual Studio subscription account page. And in that case, it's bound to your Visual Studio subscription and you don't go through the whole 90-day renewal. Like, as long as your subscription's active, you're good to go.
Yeah, this was one that when you told me, I didn't realize this, and it clicked because I have a developer tenant. I'm like, I haven't deployed like an SPFX solution or any what I would consider developer activities in there in a long time, but it keeps getting renewed. And you were like, well, did you know if it's tied to Visual Studio that it just automatically gets renewed? And I was like, that would explain it because mine is tied to Visual Studio subscription. And it just keeps going. So
yep, it's nice perpetual. Feature. Keep paying for it until the program changes and that potentially goes away. But cross your fingers, hopefully it doesn't go away anytime soon.
Yeah, that was a nice little tidbit that you dug up related to those. So should we go actually create one of these now?
Yeah, it's your turn to drive.
It's my turn to go click around.
Yeah, let's click next a couple times. I can see you're getting antsy.
I am. I need a click. Like, this is the whole read first, click later. I like click first, read later. So if you want to spin one of these up, a couple things to think of. Go to developer.microsoft.com/Microsoft 365. There's a whole bunch of stuff at developer.microsoft.com that we don't care about for this. So that's a nice handy URL. We'll put it down in the video description below. Down here, do I get to do this now? Down here.
Here, up here, way. Yeah. How do you do it for the cards? Yeah, whatever it is. We'll figure it out.
I can't do cards. We need to get enough people watching and subscribing until I can do cards. So for now, it's in the video description. Once you go here, you have this developer program, and you can go in and join now for my dashboard. So I'm not signed in right now. I'm going to go join now. Again, take the whole click first and read later. And we're going to go see what this does. Great. This is that page that you were looking at before where it gives you all that stuff, the 90 days, the E5. That's how you get to this page. So join now. And the first thing, I need to take one password out of this.
Note to self, put that on the sticky.
Note to self, disable one password. I should just be able to go do this, right? Go. Yeah, I'm not going to mess with that right now. But you need to go sign in with a Microsoft account. And this is tied to a Microsoft MSA account, a personal account, right? Like I think when we have looked at this and played with this is you can't go in and assign this to an org ID. It has to be one of those personal Microsoft accounts. Because did we try this last time? Like, did I go type in? See, I'm gonna have to get rid of that. If I go type in my org ID and hit next, oh, it does. I can't do this with my org ID though because I already have dev tenants associated with it. Same thing with my personal account.
We had this discussion in the way back when in the stream that shall not be named, where you didn't record any of your audio. You have what's called an easy ID, and I always thought of
it is nothing but easy.
Yeah, you call them easy IDs because there's nothing easy about them. In the before times when Azure AD was new and organizational accounts were new, it was possible to stand up an organizational account and a Microsoft account, so an MSA or an org ID that both shared the same login ID. So in your case, beastedgeinc at intelliginc.com.
Yep.
Today, that can't happen anymore. Like if I came in and I created the tenant scotthogue.com and I already had a Gmail address, like the same thing at scotthogue.com, I wouldn't be able to create that new org ID under it if I already had the MSA. It's blocked. So you're in this kind of weird space where you have the same identity provisioned in both systems. For most folks, this won't matter. What you really want to do when you go to sign up for one of these the first time is you want to have a MSA, a personal account like an Outlook.com, a Hotmail account. It could be, your Gmail address, whatever that is, but ultimately it's bound to a Microsoft account and not an organizational identity.
Or did we try this with an organizational identity?
And then it blows up and then you go back and create your Outlook.com identity.
Does it? Is that what we determined?
Yes.
I couldn't remember.
It's a good thing I remember. I'm here to help you.
So we can go back and I'm going to create a new one. So let's pretend we're going in brand new. We want to create a new account. This will let me go in and pick an email address. So like you said, this could be a Gmail account. It could be a iCloud account. It could be Yahoo. Do people still use Yahoo email?
I think people do use Yahoo email. Yeah. Yeah. I have family members who use Yahoo email, much to my chagrin. I'm always trying to tell them to stop, but they don't get it.
Do you know what email account my wife still uses?
AOL?
Yep. She still has an at AOL.com.
Yeah, my wife too has an AOL account and she won't give it up. Like pry it out of her cold, dead fingers.
It's complete side topic. This is what happens when we do this in the evening. Like my wife literally has like 50,000 unread emails in her AOL account.
Oh, she's one of those.
Oh, and we'll be sitting down on the couch, like watching TV or watching a movie. She's like, wait a minute, I'm deleting emails. And I'm like, to what point? Like, you have 50,000 unread emails. What difference does deleting 250 of them make at this point in time? But
it's one of those things, like, to each their own. My wife, we should have our wives talk because mine's in a very similar boat. I can also watch her sit down and start deleting those 250 emails that come in every day. They're all like spam and mailing lists or, Pottery Barn and like all the crap that's been signed up for. And I just sit there like jaw on the floor watching, next, delete. I'm like, what are you doing? And then anytime that I mention, do you know you could click unsubscribe and unsubscribe from all those lists and you would never, ever have to delete that email that you delete every single day from Pottery Barn, and just the laser eyes that come at you. Like, I know I could do that, but I don't want to. It doesn't take me a long time to delete my email every day. Like, oh boy.
How about, do you say, well, why do you have all those emails in there? And is her answer, because I might want to go back and read that one later. Do you get that?
Yeah. Those excuses exist.
Anyway.
But we're at the point where we need an MSA to go ahead and spin this up.
So guess what? I used to the cloud at Outlook.com earlier. So we're going to go with to the cloud 2. I think. So do I need to, will it let me just do that? Or is it going to actually
No.
ask me to put a domain on there?
It should ask you for a domain.
Yeah. So we'll just do to the cloud. Oh, that was nifty. Then it pops up. I can actually choose Outlook or Hotmail.
Imagine that. It's almost like Microsoft controls their own identity system.
Isn't that new? Like, I thought last time it let me pick one. Huh. Okay.
So you're about to run into...
remember that UI last time.
Well, you're about to run into the trap here. So go ahead and click next. We'll go through the motions.
You let me go through the motions. Can I use I am not using my suggested password. Because I will never remember it.
No, you're going to need to remember to delete this one again later, too.
Yeah. I don't want information. I'm not going to show my password. Okay, so next. Birth date. When was I born, Scott? February 30.
You going to be able to remember this?
That I was born February 30?
Well, whatever your fake birth date is for this thing.
19... When should I be born? Will it actually let me... Oh, it's invalid. I can't be born on February 31. It was worth a shot.
Not in that year. Or any year.
Or any year. We'll go with today. I'll be able to remember this. February 9, today. 1980 is not the correct year I was born either, but we don't want identity thieves on our YouTube channel. All right, create an account.
Oh, boy. Got to solve the puzzle.
I'm no good at puzzles. Next, pick the bat. I was looking for a baseball bat.
I was too. And then every picture is a little bit skewed. What's going on here?
Yes.
All right. Welcome. So now you get to go through the experience of saying, I would like to create a tenant. This is the Microsoft account that I'm using to do it. What country or region are you located in? So this will be the geo that your tenant is pinned to. Like if you're familiar with Azure AD on the back end and how that can be pinned to geos, things like that. Like this is where that all starts to affect you. Company, you start to get into the point where you're actually choosing the name of your tenancy. So the thing that becomes like companyname.sharepoint.com and what all that looks like. Start thinking like very clearly about what you want that to be.
Yeah, so we are going to be in the United States. And you can see, like you said, those first few steps there, setting up the password, were just that had nothing to do with really creating the Office 365 tenant itself. It was just setting up that Microsoft account. So you'll see before where I had sign in. Now I'm actually signed in with that to the cloud 2 at outlook.com account. And this is that Microsoft account that I want my Office 365 developer account to be associated with.
Yep, you got it.
So United States, I'm going to put an exclamation point in there. No, I won't do that. Just to mess with it, see what it does. To the cloud, to infinity and beyond.
Yep.
Just, there's new
Accept
movie
your
coming out
terms
with
and
Buzz Lightyear.
conditions. Take your... Yeah, but it's not really Buzz Lightyear.
It's pre-Buzz Lightyear, right? It's Buzz Lightyear before he was Buzz Lightyear. I accept.
It's
right.
it's based on the toy formerly known as Buzz Lightyear. All right. Why do you want to be a developer? I would like to do personal projects.
Yeah, this is kind of a personal project, isn't it? This is probably just more demographic information for Microsoft. This really has no effect on how the tenant's going to be stood up, what the tenant's going to have in it, any of that. This is just Microsoft's curiosity. And because you're signing up, they can force you to answer it. Next. What areas are we interested in? Do you like the SharePoint framework, Scott?
I do. I talked about it a bunch before we started. So clearly, I love it. Teams is just the best product ever. It's really not. Yeah. I like how some of these options in here, like Outlook, like Am I really interested in Outlook or am I interested in Exchange? If I was interested in Outlook, wouldn't I go to Outlook.com, not Microsoft 365? Whatever. Like, there's clearly some confusion.
Well, yeah, but most people, I guess developers should. Do you know how often I go in and I say like Exchange, and they're like, "No, my email's not an Exchange; it's an Outlook." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, sure."
Well,
Just
technically,
like,
they're right. Their email
I mean,
is an Outlook in front of them. It's coming from Exchange.
but their email is still an Exchange. It's just getting copied to their Outlook or synced
It,
to their
it, it,
Outlook.
it, it's kind of like when you're, trying to explain to like your toddler where babies come from. Well, there's a stork and there's a train, and we'll just go watch Dumbo. It's fine.
Yeah, we'll just leave it at that. And we like identity. You and I both like identity. So we're going to say we're interested in all these areas.
It's just more spam for you.
Power Platform. Yeah. Well, I think this like points you to some documentation and maybe hints towards content packs. So we've answered those questions, set up our company, answered a few questions, and we can go ahead and hit save. And now we get to make some selections about our tenant.
Yeah. So we should do some different things here. Like, just take a second and kind of pause on the screen, or if you want, we can cut over to the documentation and everything that's going on. Just like the actions that you need to take. One is an instant sandbox. And for an instant sandbox, it is instantaneous. You are going to have a pre-configured tenancy made available to you that has, I think it's 16 users. It's not all of your licenses,
Right.
but it has.
Look at it says right here 16 fictitious users.
Yeah, it would
Do you
help
want me to flip over to your documentation or just stay here?
if I read it. It's fine. We can stay here for a second.
All right.
So if you're familiar, for those of you who are Microsoft partners and have access to CDX to spin up tenants, and you've gone through that process, very similar. Like, there is a pre-provisioned tenant that already exists out there. And really, it's like going to the shelf, grabbing the tenant, sliding it over, putting it on the robot farm arm, and just pushing it in front of you, and saying, "Okay, this is going to be your tenant for the next 90 days, subject to renewal." All those kinds of things. The other option you have is go ahead and go with the configurable sandbox. The configurable sandbox, like, one of the immediate differences there is the ability to choose your domain name for your tenancy. So like mytenant.sharepoint.com, if you're going with an instant tenant and it's coming off the shelf someplace else, there's already a randomized name associated with that. So if that's not your desire, then you have to go down the path of saying, let's deploy a custom tenant. If you deploy a custom tenant and you do go down that path, because you just said, like, if anything, I want the custom domain name, you can go ahead and provision the sample data packs at a later time. So if you want to come in and install that SharePoint pack, that'll still deploy all the users, assign them their licensing, put them in their fictitious departments, assign relationships like manager, direct reports, all those kinds of things. It'll fill up email for you. All good, nice and easy, ready to go. But be mindful that it takes time to deploy the sample packs. So the benefit of doing the configurable one is you get the option to configure it. But if you want to come back and you want to deploy one of those sample data packs later, that can take hours, and in some cases, like, tens of hours. Like, think like a day, like 24 hours. I'm going to click the button and come back later to see what happens. So if you want, or you feel like, hey, it's okay if I have a randomized tenant name, like, I know I'm going to use these things and be ready to go, just go ahead and go the instant route. Like, it's the whole easy button, nice, simple, next, you're done. The other way, you potentially have more provisioning that you need to do if you want access to that sample data. And I think there's some valuable stuff like in those sample data packs. You've got the users that are available with them. You get a bunch of SharePoint sites with preloaded documents. The ability to, like, if you were interested in configuring SharePoint search, well, you're probably going to want some content to search on. Like, you probably want that to
Yep.
be valid content with real words in it. You don't want it to be like fake documents that are all just full of ones and zeros on the inside, and like text files that you generated, on your desktop and then uploaded through like a data maker tool. Like, yeah, you very well want access to those kinds of things. The mail one is an interesting one. So once you've got the user pack installed, you can go ahead and deploy the mail pack, and that is Outlook conversations, it's calendar events, it's just everything that comes along with that. So it's a full mailbox with history in it. Again, you want to test like search inside of Outlook. You're deploying a new Outlook add-in that your company wrote, and it interacts with the user mailbox. You might want real user data to go ahead and work with. The other thing you can do is go ahead and deploy the SharePoint one. Like I said, like get the sites, get the documents, everything that comes along with that. You also get all the templates from I don't know if you get all of them anymore, but you get a bunch of templates for SharePoint from the lookbook pre-installed for you. Like, nice, easy, ready to go. And then if you do Teams, that'll go ahead and stand up Teams with chats and all the other things that come along with that. So it is kind of like a rich ecosystem to go ahead and spin up and play with.
Yeah, and one thing, like, if you get to this page too, you're like, oh, I want a different tenant. This is just a screenshot. Like, this is just an image showing an example. There's nothing to change on this page other than, are you going to do instant or are you going to do configurable? As illustrated by the fact that this expires on January 5 of 2022. So it expired like a month ago. Time to update that screenshot. So I like configurable. You'll see kind of some of those changes. So if you choose instant, like you said, it's going to deploy these for sample packs automatically. It's going to set up those users. If you switch configurable, it's essentially saying you're not going to get any of those sample packs, but you can go add them. So this is interesting, Scott. I didn't catch this before. If you do configurable, and I don't know if it's an updated screenshot, but instant has Teams in here. Configurable does not have Teams. So I'm curious, if we do configurable, if we can actually deploy the Teams sample pack, or if we only get users, mail-in events, and SharePoint that we can deploy to it.
No, you should be able to deploy. So on the instant sandbox, well, let's see what they give us. So you can do users, mail-in events, users, mail-in events, blah, 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 SharePoint. You get a team site with data, but that's not Teams. You get the work at Contoso template with all the site collections and the hub sites and the communication sites and everything ready to go there. You get a crisis communication site. Yeah, it doesn't look like you get Teams later. That's kind of annoying.
It is. So I guess that would be another decision point then, is if you are doing stuff with Teams and you want this Teams sample data pack, you may have to do instant.
Yeah, so the sample data pack for Teams brings 5 sample teams, channels, tabs, and chat sessions built around those sample users.
Okay.
If you feel like it's important to have that there for you, then sure, go ahead and go for it. If not, you're on an E5, so you have the ability to provision Teams later, and you'll have the licensing for it and everything you need. You just wouldn't have the fake conversations that are there.
Right. So I'm going to do configurable just because there's a few more options here in terms of like deploying sample packs later and all of that. So let's do configurable and see where this takes us.
Living on the edge.
And we get to select our country once again. Well, it's pre-selected for us. So now we get to do a different username. And this is different in that before when I set this username, again, it was the Microsoft account. Now this is that username for the Microsoft 365 dev tenant.
Correct.
So we could call this like Scott Ben, and we could do to the cloud 2.onmicrosoft.com, because guess what? I've used to the cloud before.
Yeah, it just keep in mind in the back of your head, like as you're going through this process, like if you've never created a Microsoft 365 tenancy, the first user that you deploy is your kind of your first global admin in Azure AD. Like they are the Uber admin with all the access to all the things along the way. So whatever you make this username and this password, you need to make sure that you can remember them long enough to log in the first time and potentially change them.
Yes. And please, from a security perspective, and I've seen this with clients' perspective, one, don't make the username admin, because guess what? It's really easy to guess admin at yourcompany.onmicrosoft.com or admin at yourdomain.com. It just gives people a step up. Like, I have an admin account for my Office 365 environment, and it does not have MFA on it because I wanted a break glass account following Microsoft recommendations. I actually used a random password generator to generate the username for my admin user. So it's just a whole bunch of random characters. I have it someplace safe, but admin is not going to work to get into my tenant. The other thing I've seen people do is they do what I did here. They use their name, Ben at mycompany.com, and then you decide to leave your company, and your global admin is now your name, and it just like do something unique and do something generic for this first user is my recommendation.
Yeah. Same thing with the whole create domain thing. Like this is pretty similar to the flow for just creating a Microsoft 365 tenancy all up. And once you've selected that name, you're, for all intents and purposes, stuck with it for the life of your tenancy. Like there are capabilities that are available which will start to let you change things like your SharePoint domain name, other things along the way. But like they have all sorts of caveats today. It's not a clean process. It's not a clean break. I think you and I have talked about it in the past. It's not something that like you just walk in and you click next, and yeah, it's going to work. Like there's a lot of documentation to read and then just get to the bottom of it and question, like, do I really want to take this step?
Yeah.
I've worked for organizations like in a past life before I was doing Azure. I used to do a lot of Office 365 administration for companies I work for. And I ran into a lot of orgs where I was stepping into tenancies that had already been created, and they had the funkiest names for tenant names. Just because somebody had, like, whoever had provisioned it, right? They were the IT pro in the back room. They're used to naming their servers after Disney characters. So you've got yet another Disney character .sharepoint.com, and in reality, you are you should be like Microsoft.sharepoint.com. But because somebody thought like this is just another server in my org, I should name it that thing. Don't step into it with that mindset. Like be mindful about that step when you're creating a tenancy. Like not so much here when you're just goofing off for a 365 developer tenant, but if you're kind of taking the learnings from this and you're trying to translate those into what happens when you create a real tenant, I think it's important to recognize all the downstream impacts of where that domain manifests itself. It manifests itself as your initial UPN for your users, like unless you're going to go through and do that custom domain binding inside of Azure AD. It's your SharePoint tenant. Like it's visible and you can see it all over the place.
And like you said, the SharePoint one, they're starting to roll out that functionality to change. I have a client that I'm working with right now. Their tenant is test company at sharepoint.com. And I got on the call with them. We looked through all of that documentation around this is what comes into play when you change your SharePoint URL. And they read it all and they're like, Nope, we can live with test in there. There are that many caveats and gotchas, and this might break and this will break, and you need to go fix this. That you better be either brand new to SharePoint, or I would say have a really, really, really good reason you need to change it. Because again, a lot of companies look at it and they're like, "Nah, we'll live with what we have, and maybe do like some URL redirects or something, just so it's not required, but it's still going to be just as visible." But
Yeah.
we have all that information in there now. So now let's go ahead and click continue. And I got to put in a phone number. So Scott, talk about something with documentation on your screen while I put in my phone number and get a code.
That's perfect. Go ahead and cut over. Cut over.
Oh, I'm
You can
over.
cut over.
I cut over. You just
Okay.
can't see me cut over.
Gotcha. I get worried sometimes about all the things that you're doing on your side. So a couple of things about phone numbers on this step, just in case you happen to run into this, or you try and live a life where you don't hand out your real phone number to people like I do. I was an old Ring Central customer. I've had a Google Voice number for a number of years. Google Voice totally accepts SMS messages, all those kinds of things, but it's still a virtual number, and there are checks in place to prevent that. So you will need a real phone number along the way, just to make everything work nice and easy for you here.
There was a service somebody was telling me about. I was doing some training, and it was someone over in Australia was telling me about a service that you can use that does actually work for the phone numbers in the MFA. And I can't remember what it was now off the top of my head.
I haven't run into a publicly hosted one in the United States that works. So I know Google Voice doesn't work. Number of years ago, I ported my home phone number to a VoIP provider called VoIPO, and they allow me to accept SMS messages on what used to be a landline. That doesn't work. Like, it's not recognized by any system that I've seen. So just keep your, if you can find something awesome. If not, just recognize you're going to have to use at least a real phone number for this step to get the OTP code.
It said my phone number was invalid. Let me see if I have a typo. We are unable to send the code to that number. Please provide a valid cell phone number. Try again. It is a valid cell phone number.
You forgot your own number, huh?
Please hold while I figure out why my cell phone number is apparently no longer valid. Maybe it's because
you have you have way too many numbers in there.
No, that's
Right.
valid.
Yeah.
Please enter only digits and no other characters.
Did you try 555, 555,
555, 55.
5555? I bet it's because you did one of these like a week ago.
I did this recently.
And it's
Let me try something a minute.
So I can give you one of my real phone numbers, and we
Let
can
me
go
try
from
this one. This is.
But this becomes one of those, like,
like
I need to look away from the camera because, like I said, I only hand out my Google Voice number, so I don't really know
I think
my real phone number is off the top of my head.
Oh, so I don't have your real phone number? Do I have your real phone number?
You are going to now, but don't call me because I probably will think it's spam and won't pick it up. But you can try that as long as you're still not sharing your screen with the rest of the internet.
I'm still not sharing my screen. I don't even... Where'd you put it? Chat. I found it. I'm curious if I actually have this phone number. I'm pretty sure you gave this one to me before.
You might have that one someplace. And they do call out in the documentation that you should provide a valid cell phone number. Like, it is there.
Yes. All right.
Oh, look at that! I got a code. 87903.
87903. It's only 5. All right, and we still can't show this because it inevitably left your phone number on there while I entered the code. Set up. All right.
Set up. Oh, here we go. Now we can come back.
Come back to mine.
Great. Now I'm not going to be able to set up a dev tenant next week either.
Nope. So we better get it right this week. Okay. So I have not tried this yet. I found the service. Somebody told me that this will work. This Linphone, this open source VoIP project, works for using codes for Microsoft, MFA, Validate, etc. I guess they were using it for MFA. Now, I don't know if it varies between MFA versus setting up a tenant. But this is what they have used for getting text validation.
And so MFA dialing is different, like versus SMS.
Well, they were using this for SMS. For SMS MFA. So
I don't know.
Something we'll have to play with.
Leave it to the Australians to find a workaround.
Right? Maybe this will have to be a future YouTube is using Linphone for MFA. Anyways, it has now been set up. I have already used
a whole day.
Although it's interesting, I only got 89 days. I blame the month of February on losing a day.
Yeah. Date math is hard.
So if you set one up in February, apparently you only get 89 days instead of your full 90 days.
Well, you better get to deploying just so you hit your renewal and you're valid,
Better. So now you can see we have our developer subscription. This is the domain name for it. So I'm still in my Microsoft account up here. This is just showing that developer tenant that's been associated with my Microsoft account. The domain name for it, I have that E5. Here's that administrator username, my 25 licenses. And this is where I can actually start pushing out those data packs if I want to. So down here, I can click on users. I can't do mail and events or SharePoint yet because users is a prerequisite for those. I need users there to have a mailbox to push mail in to associate events with. Same thing with SharePoint, then they can actually show those users having made updates to documents, all of that. So users is going to be one that you need if you want to do any of the other data packs.
Yeah, so just so we can walk through the flow, because it does take a little while to do it. Like we won't get to it today. Go ahead and click plus on the users there. Like let's go through the deployment for that one just so we can see.
Yep. And now it's going to say, so copy your user ID is shown, so I can copy it or I can remember it. Have my password ready. So this is where I had better remember that password. So we can go ahead and click next. It's going to take me over here and I can put that username in. Paste that. Next. Make sure I remember my password here. I did it, Scott. I remembered it. And now it's going to ask for permission to literally every aspect of my tenant.
Well, if you think about what this is doing, it's pretty cool, right? On the back end, how many times have you created an environment once, specifically an Office 365 or M365 tenant, and you've wanted to recreate the entire thing in another place? Like you want all the users, you want the managerial relationships, you want all the data that's associated with those users, and you just want to be able to like spin up that task super quick and have it ready to go. So just based on the way kind of granular permissions work within the graph, you need the permissions to basically everything, right? Every service. It needs access to AD to deploy those users for you. So that's read and write directory data. It needs access to Teams to go ahead and create the messages. It needs access to SharePoint to spin up the site collections and then create the sites and subsites or subsite collection, like configure the hubs and the communication sites, upload the documents. Like it's a lot of stuff that it's doing on the other side.
Yep.
I've always wished that Microsoft would kind of package up that tooling. Like I've often looked at like those CDX tenants that are given to partners and thought like, wouldn't that be cool if I just had a magic button where I could create my tenant once and suck everything out of it like into like a backup, like a backpack file for SQL or something like that, and then just click a button and deploy on the other side. Like, yeah, it's going to take hours and hours and hours to deploy, but I don't care as long as it comes back all the same and ready to go. So, the other cool thing that happens with these packs is that the dates aren't fixed. So if you deploy like the email pack, like the Outlook and Collab pack today, then all the emails are from like today back 30 days. They're not from 180 days ago when the original like extract was taken out. So there is some cool stuff going on there.
So do you think it's actually, like you talk about taking a backpack or like sucking it all out and putting in a new tenant? Do you think that's even possible? Or is this a lot of like custom scripting, development, all of that to essentially create this stuff from scratch and put it in there versus like pulling it out of some backup that they took a while ago?
Oh, I totally think it's the former. Like it's a bunch of custom scripting and actions that go through. You have to wonder like what it's doing to do it though. Like what kind of private APIs is it using, right? Like how does an email
that would be
created?
Interesting.
Yeah, how does an email get created in a user's mailbox that's backdated 30 days? Oh, how does that happen? Right? Like, well, you're probably restoring a mailbox or copying it over from someplace else, but where are you copying it from that it has like the dates always exactly back that way? I don't know. I always thought it would be a nifty thing to package up. It'd be super valuable to, I think, partners, system integrators, ISVs to have something like that. But, never seen it, so.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there's a reason they keep some of those APIs super secret, because just think what you could do if you could go in and like start changing dates on emails and files and all of that via APIs.
I'd have all sorts of fun.
I'm sure you would. So we're going to go ahead and accept, because in order to deploy this, we kind of have to do that. And then we get to configure one shared password. So this is going in and creating those 16 users. What this is asking for is, what password do you want? Just a minute, I can't talk and type. What password do you want for all of those users? So all 16 users are going to get this password that you type in, so that if you do want to go use one of those users, log in with one of those users, you actually know the password for it. You don't have to go through like a password reset to get their password or any of that. 16 users all have the same password.
Yep. Ready to go.
Remember and store it for future use. Perfect. Install. This should
keep
take
that one in the back of your head.
Yeah, it's the same one as my admin user. I just use the same password for everything because that's what my security guy told me to do.
You're taking that one password thing really to heart, aren't you?
I really am. And then it's on a sticky note on the bottom of my keyboard.
All right. Cool. So you kicked off that process there. At this point, we've only been in the Microsoft 365 developer program like overview dashboard. You haven't actually logged into your tenant yet, other than giving that app permission to deploy things and get that going. So maybe let's pop open another tab or click go to subscription there, and let's pop into the admin center.
See what that does. So go to subscription. See it already entered in my username, password there, so I can go ahead and enter in my password at this point in time.
Only if you remember it.
And sign in. I remember it. Remember, it's the same password for everything on the bottom of my keyboard on that sticky note.
Yeah.
So it's going to go in and log me into my Office 365 tenant, where I can get my work done with Office 365. And I can manage my organization in the admin center and brainstorm together in Word and stay on top of everything in Outlook and all the other things. So this should...
You made it.
I made it. I made it through all those pop-ups. This should look just like a normal Office 365 tenant. If you would go to office.com, portal.office.com, and log into your Work environment, this should look the same. Again, you have your app bar down the left side with your different Office 365 apps. You have your user information. You can see I'm logged in with my Scott and Ben account. Settings, to do, my day, which is really to do. Everything's there. If I click on apps, I can jump right over to that admin center.
Yep, because you are a global admin. Like
I
you've
am a
only
global
got
admin.
this one user so far.
I can log in with my FNU, LNU, and go right to that admin center. Finish setting up my developer without Windows and audio conferencing. So that is one thing.
This one disappointed you last time that you don't get a cloud
that
PC.
I don't get my cloud PC with it. And that is one thing to call out, that a normal Microsoft 365 E5 account includes Office 365 E5 because despite marketing's best attempts, those are two very different products yet. EMS E5 and Windows 365 E5. So those three E5 products are included in the normal Microsoft 365 E5 product. The developer one, you get the EMS E5 and you get Office 365 E5. So all of your Office 365 stuff and then all your mobility and security stuff. So if you want to go play with things like conditional access or with mobile device management, Intune, Endpoint Manager, all of those things are also included in here. So if I would, like, for instance, go to Joel and all my admin centers, you'll see the Azure Advanced Threat Protection in here, the Endpoint Manager is in here, your security portal is in there. So this is not just those Office services, but that whole suite of both the security products that are in that EMS E5, as well as that Office 365 E5 stuff.
Stuff. Love it.
Stuff.
Very technical.
Exactly. Very technical term.
So you can, like, what's not included here as well is Azure. So you do have an Azure Active Directory that's provisioned for you. So if you went to portal.azure.com and you signed in as this user right now, you've got an Azure Active Directory that's sitting there behind you, but it doesn't have a valid Azure subscription associated with it. I think that's always been one of the weird things in the Azure Active Directory branding when it comes to like Microsoft 365, Office 365, is your identity lives in this service for this thing that you really don't need a license to like the parent branding for.
Yep.
In this case, Azure AD and Azure itself. If you wanted to, you could go and sign up for an Azure subscription as well. There are free subscriptions to Azure. You can do the free trial, whatever that happens to be. I think it's like $200 for a month. You could spin up a Paygo account behind it if you wanted to. Like all sorts of options there for you.
So I have a question, Scott, because I've never tried this before, and I'm curious what would happen. What would happen if I spun up my Azure subscription, I associated a credit card with it, I went and created a bunch of resources, and my developer tenant got expired? Do I lose Azure Active Directory and thus my Azure subscription, or does my Azure subscription stay there, but I can't get into Office 365 anymore?
It should be the former, because AAD doesn't go away. You haven't deleted your directory.
Right. You've just deleted the Office subscription.
Right. It's a separate thing. So retention of your AAD tenant stays around.
Which then, in theory, I should be able to go and grab that custom domain name out of it if Azure AD stays around.
In theory.
In theory. We might have to test this theory. I might have to go associate a custom domain with this, let my developer tenant expire, and see if I can get back to Azure AD to steal that custom domain name back. But yeah, like you said, you still have all of that Azure stuff in the background. All my admin centers, we can go see if my users started deploying, active users. Nope, it's going to take more than 5 minutes like it did last time I tried this. So here you can say it's still spinning. Yeah, it should take more than 5 minutes.
Well, you can refresh the page to view your progress. Have you tried that yet? Have you restarted your computer? Because that really matters about your cloud provisioning.
Hey, look at it's taking longer than usual. Please refresh the page. So now you really just sit here and wait. But again, you can go in, start drilling through all of these. We can show licensing. So if you go to billing and your licenses over here in Office 365, you'd be able to see those 25 licenses, 24 available. My admin user has one of them. So I really have 24. Those 16 users are going to take up the other one. So I'd still end up with, 6 or so left if I wanted to create some additional users.
Yep. They're there ready to go for you. The other thing that you could do is if you just wanted to start poking around and taking a look at things, maybe while you're setting some of this up, you want to take a look at the Security and Compliance Center.
I thought you were going to say Yammer.
No, nobody should take a look at Yammer. But you have access to that E5 subscription. So if you're only an E3 subscriber, there's probably some new stuff in here that you can start taking a look at.
Yep. So it'll go spin up my security center, look through all of those different things, threat trackers, audit log. I wonder if this is turned on by default. Probably not. Nope. So if you want to do the unified audit log, you can start recording your user and user admin activity in there. It'll go through, set all of that up. The other interesting...
I love how the modals are still all broken and in different fonts.
Right.
The rest of the site.
And then usually what this says is that it will throw some error message that it didn't work or it wasn't able to enable it. But if you go refresh the page, it's all enabled.
Pro tip.
Yeah. Pro tip, it says it's not enabled, but it really is. The other interesting thing, because you said if you're on an E3, you may not see everything. And if you've done a bunch with Office 365, you may know about it. But going into these licenses and apps and just clicking on apps and go look at all of those different apps that you're licensed for. You'll notice you have those E5s. You have your Azure AD Premium P1 and P2. You have your Azure Information Protection, Microsoft Information Protection. Remember that podcast episode? AIP, also known as. You have your rights management in here, common data service, data classification, a bunch of your advanced auditing, phone systems, Defender, communications DLP, all of these, a bunch of the insider risks. There are a bunch of updates I saw this week on the roadmap about insider risk management stuff. That machine learning based classification. So if you want to play with the auto labeling, and that classification of your content based on sensitive information that's in an E5, you can go in and play with all of that. So really flipping through all of this and looking through what are some of those new things that I have or new things I want to play with. Viva Learning seeded. This is an interesting SKU. I wonder if they have a bunch of the learning stuff already seeded into this dev tenant. But all those applications that you can go in and just start playing with right away.
Yeah. Power BI, Power Automate, Common Data Service, all that stuff's there for you. And maybe that's another thing to call out is we kind of approach this as you're using Microsoft 365 services, which you tend to think of, I think, as SharePoint, Exchange, but Power Platform stuff is there as well. And analytics, Power BI. I think there's Power BI Pro or Premium licenses. Can't remember.
Pro, not Premium. Premium's expensive. You get Power BI Pro though. But
when you have Power BI Premium, you can do that really cool backup and restore of your data sets.
And embedding and unlimited sharing. But I think it starts at $3,000 a month. You don't get a $3,000 license with this.
Chump change. Come on.
Although you're close, 25 licenses at $60 a pop? About $1,000 in licensing. Oh, but it's 90 days, so it's times 3 months. It is. It's about $3,000 worth of licenses right here.
And what happens in the future when you can't buy a month-over-month license anymore? It's just the only way that you can do it.
Really?
What?
You're not going to be able to buy month-over-month license? I still buy my month-over-month licenses.
They talked about that, didn't they? That the minimum retention or like the minimum amount of time, like you would have to get like a year license. Like you could still be invoiced for it monthly, but you're signing up for the year.
Got it, but you have to sign up a year at a time.
Yep.
It's still creating. I refreshed. It's still going.
It's going to be there a while. You're never going to have it.
So I would say, because we're now 2 for 2 on this, where users, and it says it's about 5 minutes, and it's taken at least 20 or 25. So going back to what we talked about with the instant tenant versus the custom one, is if you need these sample data packs right away, you're going to want to do instant. This is not that 5 minute. This is, like 20, 25 minutes just for users. And then it does say up to 2 days to fully deploy mail-in events and SharePoint if you're going to do all that. A couple other things, I guess, to look at down here is this is all based, you'll notice these filters are based on what we selected when we set up that tenant in terms of just other quick starts, documentation. None of these down here are going to deploy anything into your tenant. It's just going to be some reference documentation. I don't know where, like these quick starts, they all go to docs.microsoft.com. In terms of learning more, getting started with some of those topics that you chose, if there's something else you find out you're interested in, like Outlook, you can go in and you're not going to be limited to just that. You can go through and start clicking on other things click on them, apply, to get some additional documentation references down here to get you started. Again, primarily, this is going to be geared primarily towards the development stuff down at the bottom here.
Yeah, easy peasy.
Exactly.
Mac and cheesy.
Anything else? We've been going for, I don't know, an hour or so now, I think.
No, that's it. I think it's a decent overview of what's out there and available to you. It took us an hour to kind of get through this and banter our way through it, but realistically, it's a 10-minute process if you know what you're doing.
Yep. It doesn't take long, unless you need content packs, in which case, who knows how long it'll take. I still don't even have one of those users. Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks. We'll have to come up with other topics. If you're watching this post-live recording and there's other tech you are curious about, you want to see us demo, play with, let us know in the comments. Make a comment about what you want to see, and we'll see if we feel like learning about it and playing with it.
Yeah, I had fun. Thanks, Ben.
All right. Thank you, Scott. And we will talk to you again in, I don't know, another week or so. I think we'll do another one of these another week, every 2 weeks. I think our cadence we're going to aim for is at least every other week.
Calendar. Yep,
exactly. All right. Well, we'll wrap this up and we'll talk to you later.